Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2. So did anybody have a chance to go to the gym this morning? Anybody out there? There's a couple of them there? Okay. I wasn't there, so I didn't see you. You didn't see me. I wanted to, but I didn't. But here's what I did. Last night I woke up in the middle of the night. And I just felt compelled to take a walk. So I went outside, and I walked through this giant expanse of sagebrush and emptiness under a cloud-filled moon. I approached a bush in the distance, and as I walked closer, the bush burst into flames. Then a figure emerged, a spirit guide. He walked toward me, almost floating, and handed me these documents. Questions for the panel discussion today. Or I just went down to the FedEx Business Center early this morning and printed them out. I didn't have my coffee yet, so either or, here we are. So today, we got a little taste yesterday on the advisory discussion panel, especially for me that I'm a big fan of practical innovation and pragmatic solutions and doing things for a purpose. So this panel is going to build upon some of the framework built yesterday in terms of the different technologies and initiatives and culture things and skills gaps and all that other good stuff, but hopefully focusing on things that are actually happening out there. One of the problems with things like AI and machine learning is there's still a lot of conversation around that. And I know Blaine is, I guess Blaine is out there. He's not a fan of POCs, but a lot of POCs out there, proof of concept, because you got to convince the board you're doing something important. But there's, in terms of practical solutions out there, it's still the early stages. So we're still learning as we go along with the machines. But anyway, hopefully we'll dig a little deeper into some key topics, make it fun. I encourage everyone, as Phil said, to ask questions, raise your hand. It's a little difficult with the lights. I feel like I'm in an expressway with Mad Marge heading toward me in a tractor trailer. But raise your hand and someone will get a mic to you and ask questions and challenge us. And I've encouraged the panelists to challenge each other because I want to have a good discussion. And if not, I'm just going to be forced to play devil's advocate again and go down that road. I know Ken is prepared for that, but we'll see. So speaking of Ken, joining me in the discussion today are Ken Piddington, previously with MRE Consulting, now a CIO. I also have Rohinee Mohindroo, a co-founder and chief transformation officer with Dyjit. Was a solutions architect, a provider, I guess, developer. She's done a lot of projects around the world. Satya Jayadev, VP and CIO of Skyworks Solutions, and our newest member to the CIO Executive Council. Welcome aboard, Satya, who has extensive background as a CIO. And as I pointed out this morning, he's one of the few CIOs who've had the opportunity to build an IT organization with nothing. He's like a god. He created, called into a company and said, make an IT organization. So he kind of liked it because there was no legacy. So that's his background. And of course, Doug Saunders, VP and CIO, Advanced Disposal Services, which now is part of Waste Management and the biggest waste management company in the world, which is terrific. And I'm very pleased to have Doug here. And Doug is going to talk about some really interesting IoT data analytics activities that are happening in terms of the global waste problem, the local waste problem, as it were. So every month, IDC has a company-wide briefing. IDC is our parent company, and they call all the analysts together from all over the world, 1,100 analysts, and ask them what the trends are for the past month. So in May, they outline some of the trends, and of course, it's IT transformation. That's a given. That's no surprise. Why are we paying you? But IT outsourcing, security, AI, IT OT, which we talked about yesterday, cloud technology, DevOps, governance, risk and compliance, and the customer experience. And also business analytics. So we're going to tackle as many topics as we can on that long list and hopefully have a lively discussion. And we'll get started. So let's begin with AI. So AI is certainly making a lot of traction, as is machine learning and IT. There's a lot going on in terms of pilot projects, interest. I don't think I've talked to any company that hasn't said they don't have something going in machine learning. They're probably lying to me because you got to say, oh yeah, we're doing that. But there's some serious stuff happening, some actual stuff, especially on the customer-facing side. But there are challenges out there, not the least of which is cybersecurity. So that's my first question to the panel. I mean, let's talk about some of the challenges that have to do in AI, some of the roadblocks or some of the things that maybe might push us off into the wrong tangent. And I'm going to pick on Ken for that first one. Hey, Ken.
Thanks, Tim.
Ken.
Yeah, no, there's a lot, I think, going on in organizations wanting to do things with AI and put that umbrella of AI and all the different things that fit under there, like machine learning. I kind of group them together as opposed to being separate. But as we think about challenges, I think a lot of organizations are trying to rush to it and not focus on what Stephanie said earlier yesterday about we need to look at business outcomes first. But I think challenges with it, you've got your teams, are they skilled enough and do they have the expertise to do that? Maybe if you're not trying to do the things internally and you're looking at off-the-shelf solutions for it, are they truly ready for prime time? Can your team manage it? How's that going to work? And then you got to deal with the culture and the change management side of it where people are going, is this going to replace my job? I'm starting to bring in AI platforms that are going to be smarter than me and maybe automate things that mean I don't need to be there. So those are challenges that we've got to work through. But for us, it's been a lot of what's right for the organization based on the business outcomes. How do we make sure our teams are ready to absorb this, and then we've got the right skill to do it. Tim, as you quoted me yesterday, understand the art of the possible.
Took it back, didn't you?
I did. I'm going to steal it back.
You took the thing back. Okay, we'll see. We'll ping pong that thing throughout the morning. Rohinee, so the people aspect is important. Getting the right skilled people there. Are they there to do the job? But it's got to be beyond that. I mean, are we doing a lot of AI that's just for going through the motions, or we're just experimenting, or being innovative for the company? Give me some ideas of what practical stuff out there is happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a camp that does things for the sake of doing it. But there is some really good stuff happening out there as well. I've spent the last 3 years working with 2 AI vendors and spanned about 50 Fortune 1000 AI implementations. And there's some really interesting stuff and real business value that can be delivered. So all the way from, I guess it falls under two areas as far as the implementation of AI and machine learning. It can be use cases that are specific to improving your employee and your internal experiences, so very much targeted towards your employee base and what's happening within the company. And then the second area is really leveraging those technologies to improve your customer experience, which we hear a lot about. So companies across various industries, insurance, financial, healthcare, those experiences, there's opportunity to improve them via not just AI particularly, but a convergence of different technologies along with AI.
Yeah, so AI seems like more like it's being relegated like Comcast to be a pipeline, and it depends what you're going to tack onto that pipeline to make it really useful and relevant to people, I expect. Doug, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think, for us, to me, you can't take let's just do AI. It really encompasses everything you're doing in the enterprise. And for us, it's IoT. It's around the analytics space. It's around, your legacy technical debt. How do you integrate all that? And some of the things that we were able to do and really create new revenue models, new products, using IoT and AI and some of these things were pretty fantastic. And I think the other challenge was, and I think Ken mentioned it, was typically you have 10% that really embrace this and are the drivers of this. You have another 60% that, hey, we're doing something new, I'm going to do it anyway. And then you have 30% that just fight the crap out of it the whole time. And so how do you, get everyone on the same page to really drive to this new way of doing things? And that legacy change is tough. But I think you got to look at not just AI, but everything in your enterprise and what that encompasses and how does that all integrate and work for what your objective is.
Seems like a big task out there when you're doing that. Does anybody in the audience have any comments on that in terms of what might their opinions on AI? We talked about people. We've talked about add-ons, the legacy problem. Anybody else have any observations? I can't really see anybody, but if a hand goes up, I'm sure a mic will be placed in front of your face. No one? Okay, sorry.
Hello, everyone hear me now?
Yep.
I work for a railroad, Kansas City Southern, and where we're seeing AI have a positive impact is around video. And we use a lot of video to basically do predictive maintenance and failure maintenance on rail cars, track, locomotive, We can even use it internally, inward-facing cameras and outward-facing. And it's really going to be even in the yards for movement of cars, inventory management. And so we think on the videos front is where you're going to see a lot of AI opportunities in what you'd call OT.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. And a number of applications I've seen, we have an award called the Ones to Watch and Digital Edge Awards that IDG gives out. And the Digital Edge focuses on projects, and please, apply for an award. But a number of the projects this year had to do with railroads and shipping and I don't want to call them old school industries, but obviously established, that are using AI and technology to do some really amazing things. So I think that integrating the cameras and the AI and predictive analytics and things like that. And predictive analytics is to me the most interesting part of what the potential of AI is. Satya and I talked a little bit this morning at breakfast about the black and white nature of machine learning and AI. If A is equal to B, then the answer is C. And that doesn't necessarily wash when you're looking into predictive or assumptive analytics or intuitive systems. Satya, how do you feel about that?
I think most of the things that we want to do is driven by business need. And Skyworks, we are trying to see what drives that. We don't want to push technology for the sake of pushing it. And I think that's what you see. And we had a good discussion yesterday about some of these millennials coming in and trying to push technology in terms of what they want to do rather than what the business needs. Even if you take these, predictive analytics is changing the space too. Especially we have a lot of these, maintenance and things like that, where we have these forklift trucks and things, which is changing the way how we look at it. How do we start using AI or even machine learning for that matter? And IoT is we actually manufacture IoT. So we are looking at areas where we are trying to see some benefit from there, but it's all coming down to business case. What drives the need, and how do we serve that need? Do we use the tools for the sake of using it, or do we just make sure that the need is what basically drives us towards those technologies?
And Ken, you're with SDR Energy. Obviously, that's one industry that can benefit from AI, especially on a lot of accounts, especially predictive analytics. But there's that trust factor. I mean, if you look at oil rigs and stuff like that, there's a lot of intuitive systems that if something happens, they can shut down these valves and that valves more quickly than a human. But you have to trust that it's going to do the right thing. And is that a problem, building that trust?
I think it is, and especially if we think about the energy industry that I get to play in, it's an old, dirty industry, and there's a lot of manual efforts that go in. And as you start to introduce new technologies that are going to take the place of a decision of somebody who's been in that oil field for years and deciding to turn on or turn off a valve based on something that they're seeing, and now you're letting technology make the decision about shutting that on or off based on the data it's receiving from the various IoT devices, and making a decision based on the algorithms that you have about what may happen if we don't turn it off from a safety perspective. While we all agree safety is the number one priority, there's some that are a little slower to get on board with doing that. There are some companies out there that are really far ahead in that, but the majority of the industry is definitely lagging behind. But the gentleman mentioned the comment about the railroad stuff and the AI there. I think that's a great use case that you're seeing a lot of. We are doing some things like that with our own trucking, and I've done some of that stuff previously at another company as we looked at the health of assets and being able to use some machine learning algorithms to predict failure so that we could be more proactive in servicing them.
I'm actually going to update your LinkedIn profile and say you work for an old dirty industry. I really like that.
Beats an old smelly one.
That's right. It's a little smelly too, depending on where you're at.
Can be smelly, yeah. So AI is the pipeline. You add things to it. It links to other systems. Everything's communicating. Sounds like it's ripe for cybersecurity breaches and all sorts of concerns. If I was a CISO, I probably wouldn't sleep very well at night. I don't know, Doug, you want to comment on that? How well do you sleep?
Not well. Even we're not Amazon, we're not retail, which I think we're not a high target, we're not Microsoft, right? So no one's really trying to attack a trash company, but you worry about that, and I think you can leverage some of these tools. It's we're not a huge organization. Well, about to be, but we're not now. And so how do you leverage technology to really help you in the security space, and using AI and analytics and things of that nature to look at, what are the most relevant security events that we need to tackle? And I think that's something that is extremely helpful for us with limited staff, with limited, capabilities, especially in North Florida. It's not the biggest tech community in the world. And so really leveraging some of this technology to augment our staff to really get these outcomes that we desire and to help protect our assets and our information is critical.
And so, there's definitely a need for compliance and governance and structure, best practices out there. Is that happening at this point? Is the cart before the horse in many respects, Satya?
Yeah, so I think coming back to this, cybersecurity, and which includes compliance and governance too. It's very important as CIOs. It's important to be very paranoid about this, almost borderline schizophrenic, to kind of make sure that you are covering all the bases. And we also have shadow IT that's on the fringes that causes a lot of disruption to compliance and governance. And I think that's where the sweet spot is. How do you balance out these things? We had a good discussion earlier about how do we embrace shadow IT, especially from a compliance and a governance aspect of it, because it's coming to a point where you're seeing a lot of fringe innovation happening, and at the same time there is a lot of fear that what are we exposing in the age of GDPR? How much of your data is being exposed? Are they conforming to the policies, your framework, and so forth? So I think it becomes very important as to how do you balance these things, and how do you embrace all of these factors to make sure that you have a very strong compliance framework. At the same time, you also have a good in cybersecurity areas, and you're also growing the business. You're also bringing in new innovation, and you're making productivity your business case to kind of sell things forward. It's a very testing time, and I think it is a challenge for sure.
Okay, we're going to redact your use of the word shadow IT out of the final transcript. You never said that. So predictive analytics is interesting. We're going to switch gears a bit and focus on machine learning. And it is what it is. It's machines learning to do things, so there's a learning curve there. How many out there are involved in some sort of machine learning pilot project, POC, or doing so? Just raise your hands. Yeah, so it's small. About AI. Or as Microsoft commercials say, AI. So in terms of that, again, machines are learning about that, but like anything, I think what's missing is a sort of a standard of understanding, sort of a framework to build upon that learning. Do you think does that exist at this point? Is there some sort of synthetic data that says this is what you should use as the norm before you go off and make some predictive stuff, or is that the missing piece that we still have to work on? And we'll go with Rohinee with that one.
I think it has a lot to do with the use case you select. We're starting to see companies in the industry that are specializing in providing the data needed as patterns are developing around what types of use cases clients are pursuing. There are companies that are starting to now specialize in providing that synthetic data as well. There's a pretty large player in the space called Appen, A-P-P-E-N. They've just completed an acquisition of their competitor, Figure 8, that also did similar services, where you can actually tailor the data sets you need down to the demographic level across the globe, look for specific demographics, different cultures, different accents, down if you're doing voice use cases. So there's a lot going on around AI to enable the implementation, because there's enough experience now out in the industry where you can see where the pain points are and where people are stumbling and where they're succeeding. And there's an industry just happening around that as well, which is awesome.
What is this a framework of understanding that norm that you're talking about? I mean, there's a lot of activities happening, but you're talking different industries, different applications, a lot of different strategies. Is that framework missing? Because again, machines are learning. It should have, it's like, when I was much younger, we took Latin in school, and everybody says, oh, why are you taking Latin? It's a dead language. Well, Latin is the basis of a lot of languages, and you can learn the derivation of words and all that, so it does have some use. Is that needed with AI? Does every industry should be something be developed?
I think what's needed is, we talked yesterday about enterprises becoming agile. And it's really, from my experience, it's less about Agile's just a way of operating at the project and at the work level. But at the enterprise level, it's really more the openness to learn. And that ties into culture. So it's almost like we need to transition enterprises from being those closed systems to open systems. And we need to be targeting becoming an open enterprise as opposed to an agile enterprise.
Everybody on the panel agree with that? Anybody?
I just come back to you were talking about the synthetic data. You know, great that there's opportunities out there to get it from other organizations. But I agree with you. It really depends on the use case. And you as an organization need to understand what that use case is, and your team needs to understand what's going on. We did one with our machine learning around IT assets, and it was about us understanding what good looked like for the asset to be able to feed that into the learning algorithm. And when we first did it, not only did the algorithm have to learn, but we had to learn. We were only getting about a 80% hit accuracy rate on what the algorithm was saying. This is a healthy system, or this is a bad system. And then by continuing to feed it better and better data points, where we were learning ourselves, it was learning more until we ultimately got to 98% accuracy rate.
All right, so how many out in the audience planning to fire massive amounts of people this year? Anybody? Well, that's the stigma out there with AI and RPA and machine learning, is that it's going to replace a lot of jobs. And the cruel truth is it will, because it's meant to do that, a lot of manual, tedious stuff. And a lot of companies are looking to reskill valuable employees to keep them, because there is a really critical skill shortage in IT right now. I'm wondering if what the panel's opinions on that in terms of the amount of job elimination, and how difficult is it to establish a reskilling program. Now, we've talked to Satya, as I said in the beginning, was lucky enough to start with a blank slate with an IT organization and structure. But when you have legacy systems, you have employees, and you don't have a big talent pool, there are challenges. So Satya, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, so I think my thinking is a little different from my peers that I've actually spoken to about. I look at IT as being more business savvy and being a little tech centric in terms of what they're trying to do. And I believe that I think if we focus on the business issues, I think we should leave the enablement of this to the experts. There are plenty of partners who do this for a living, and I think she just dropped a few of them here. I think we ought to take advantage of that, and I feel like at this point in time, reskilling is going to take a while, and I think we always run against time. And so I've always encouraged my folks to attend some of these IoT seminars or AI seminars, because the important thing is knowing the art of possible, basically, to understand what's available out there and how can we take advantage of that. The enablement piece is the easy part. The most important part is to understand the process, understand how can it add value to my business. And I think once you've got that, it's easy to kind of pivot into areas of enablement where you've got plenty of players in the space. And when I go to these seminars too, I'm looking for these AI vendors, for these AI partners. What are they doing? What have they done in the semiconductor space? Can we use them? Can we start off with I'm sorry to use the word POC, but can we start off with a POC? Can we use that to kind of leverage more into our organization? So I think the enablement piece, people are so hung up on understanding how does AI help? How can I get into AI coding? How can I get into machine learning or even RPA? But the most important piece is, how does RPA add value to your organization? If you understand the high-level architecture of AIA, that's going to kind of help you lead into more of these areas. And I think when I built the organization for a $3 billion corporation, the intent was, how do I bring these players who are more strategic, who can actually get these things done? And I think the important thing is to change the transformation layer from the transactional layer. I think if you've got these two layers operating, it keeps it easier for you, that you know that there are people who can enable those layers for you, and your goal is to make sure that whatever you're doing adds value to the business.
So Doug, you're in a unique position now where you're a smaller organization being absorbed by a larger organization. Obviously, the IT organizations are going to merge. So is this an opportunity to explore RPA or reskilling or a massive reorganization of the IT workforce?
It is. I mean, it's kind of my third rodeo going through this. I think a lot of it also depends on, so I had inherited staff, for example, that didn't want to change at all. So we've been operating this way for 4 or 5 years, taking care of legacy things, and I came in with a little bit more of an innovation in mind, et cetera. And so you got to make the decision. Yeah, do you want to learn something new, or are you going to find something else? So unfortunately for us, we flipped out 80% of that organization in 2 years. Now being absorbed into another organization and not really knowing what to expect. I mean, there's a ton of opportunity in our sector to look at how you can leverage this technology to create new product and business models. So for example, you pick up a commercial account like a McDonald's 3 times a week, whether it's full or not. Well, we've been doing some things around IoT sensors and containers where I don't like the term, but Uberize the trash business and say, I'm going to pick it up on demand. Now it's full, come get it. And now I'm going to dynamically route it. I'm going to schedule it, and it's all completely done automated. Or I can look at, it's a florist, and it's Mother's Day. Well, for 3 years in a row, they need an extra pickup. Just schedule it. Don't make them call. So are your people willing to do that? Is your business willing to go there? And who is going to support it? And I think those are all questions that you really need to answer to really take advantage of some of this new technology.
I think, go ahead.
I would say on this talent side, I think it's interesting. It depends on industry whether or not, it's not just about IT, but every department in your organization about whether or not, as we bring in AI and RPA and other things like that, of whether we're going to lose people or they're going to be doing different things. I like to refer to it as adding this stuff creates added intelligence to the organization, where now we've automated the routine types of things and giving them the smarts and the ability to then focus on what's really important to the organization. Plus, with these technologies, you've got new roles that have to come about. Someone's got to supervise and manage this AI or machine learning platform. Someone's got to manage and maintain it. So you have different roles already coming into play. I'm sure there's going to be some organizations where certain roles are definitely going to be eliminated, but being able to reskill them, I think, is, depending on the industry, isn't going to be that challenging. Especially if we look at it as not as AI, but as more as I'm adding intelligence to you, the human, and I think both Stephanie and Blaine said it yesterday, the human to machine collaboration that's got to happen in the organization creates that added intelligence, allowing us to do a better job, to do all that automation of scheduling. You still need a dispatcher. You still need someone who really knows and understands that this truck, that the automated process may be able to take it instead of a blank slate to figure out what your trucking is going to do, but give you a base and say, okay, this is what we should do. This is the best plan. Let me look it over and add a little of that human intelligence that needs to happen there to make sure we truly understand it.
And we've tried to look, this is a great opportunity for you. This is not, you're not losing a job. You can learn something new that makes you more valuable. Take advantage of it. And, some do, some don't. And I think that's really where you need that team that really wants to learn new things and change and adapt, both on the IT and the business side.
Do most companies have the leeway or the either financially or the time to do that, though? I mean, is there a need for someone to come in from the outside, or can someone from the outside understand the business model to actually do that stuff? I mean, that would seem to be a problem in itself. Satya?
Yeah, I think that's a key question, right? Do we have to reinvent the wheel, or do we have people who already invented it? And I think, how can we take advantage of it? And we always run against time. There's no question about it. And that's not my core competency. I think our core competency is to make sure that we enable the business so they can kind of expedite the process from ideation to fruition. So I think my job is to say what is available and how can I bridge that. So I'm not going to be sitting here trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of how can I learn more AI, how can we get into like deep learning or machine learning or things like that. If there's a product out there, and if I feel that that's going to fit into my model or give my company the competitive advantage, I'm going to bring it and bolt it, and that's about it. I think I'm not going to be building it on my own, and that's where because we are not a software company, we are more of a manufacturing company where our core competencies are in a different area. So it is important to understand what's going on in the industry, what's going on with all these AI products or with all these like machine learnings that's actually happening, and then identifying those technologies and bringing it in, and that's where your team plays a big role. How can they be those watchdogs, and how can they kind of stitch these products together? I think that's where the secret sauce is, I would say.
You sound like my wife. Every time I pick up a hammer, I go find someone who knows what they're doing with it. So, Rohinee, what are your views on that? So, can most companies, you've dealt with a lot of companies in a consulting basis and going out there, can most companies do that reskilling? I mean, is that going to be huge? I mean, it just seems to me that so much is happening in terms of digital transformation and what's happening in the IT organization, and that's just one more pancake on top of the pile.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
could use that,
it's
by the way.
I don't think AI, it may be the uncertainty that's raising the fear factor, but my experience has been it's not any different than any other transformation that we've gone through as an industry. It's just a lot of it happening at the same time. Key partnership that I've seen work really well is with HR, and actually having HR take on the non-traditional role and take on talent management and helping your teams with adapting and learning new skills, coming up with a program. That's not something that only IT can do, and it's not something that only business can do. So HR really, like those supporting functions, need to step up as well and come to the table and own talent management and upskilling and retention and hiring is probably another challenge as well, you know, getting the right skills.
Anyone from the audience want to ask a question related to reskilling? Go ahead. Or any other topic that we discussed.
Could I ask, give your name and company, please?
Kirk Keller, University of Missouri.
And your social security number?
Yes. A lot of times with these new innovations, companies need some basic enabling capabilities that they may have missed the first time around. And so you're in this spot where you're trying to leapfrog to get into something. So what are some of the basic IT capabilities that an organization would need to have in place in order to be able to step into some of these new trends in AI or automation that we're talking about here?
First thing to me is data management. I think all of the stuff that we're talking about is data, data, data. And if we continue to focus in on traditional ways of managing data and doing it, we're setting ourselves up for failure. If we've not done a good job in how we manage that data, how we trust in the quality and integrity of it, and how we're able to move it at the speed our organization needs it for all of this, putting all the money into AI and RPA, you're kind of wasting your time if that foundation of data isn't solidified first.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think data is key, and then how do you integrate it, right? So what's your plan? I mean, when I walked in, I had so many point-to-point, it looked like my mom's spaghetti plate, right? You had to unbundle that, and we leveraged a technology called MuleSoft where we could reuse these services and expose them to all these new technologies as well as the legacy. But to your point, if the data's not right, it doesn't matter anyway. So that is where you start, my opinion.
And I would also add having a solid business case for it. I think like these technologies are great, data is great, but I think you need to sometimes a simple SQL report kind of helps solve the issue rather than bringing in some sophisticated technologies. But I think it'll come down to what is the business case that you're trying to solve and what's the business going to be getting out of this. And then you look for technologies and you look for AI or machine learning depending upon what fits you. We were trying to solve a track and trace issue, and we did investigate blockchain to see if that could help. But at the end of the day, we found out that blockchain wasn't going to help us, and we went with a simple way of integrating our data and some strong analytics that can help solve the problem. So
it always starts with a business case. I mean, you're right. I mean, you're not doing anything without that, right? Because then there's you're just throwing technology at something. But if you get the business case, I agree with Ken that data is just key. If that data is organized correctly, it will make your that work a lot easier.
And I'm also obligated to say this: cybersecurity is important.
Okay, then.
I would just take Satya's point, I think, to another level, which is actually understanding your business. And we talked about that yesterday as well. IT speaking the language of the business, which means understanding what problem you're really trying to solve.
Yeah, and it all goes back to, I've been in the waste industry for 20 years, right? So I've ridden in trucks, I've said it. So, I guess I'm just inherently saying I know what they're trying to solve, right? And you're right. If you don't, if I walked into, when I went to Bertelsmann and worked for a big, large German media company, okay, I didn't need to learn the business, and it was a little different, speed of getting to some sort of solution. So yeah, you're right. That relationship with your business is key. If you have a great one, I think you can move forward, and they have a lot of trust in you to help bring these ideas forward, and you work together as a team collaboratively. It's not just IT to get those complete and done.
It's great that you have that insight, but does everybody on your team actually, are they educated on the business, which is where it usually falls apart.
It can break down if you don't have that. You're right.
And that gets back to the whole culture and changing the mindset of IT and business at the same time. And we'll talk about that in a moment. I think data management is a very important topic, the quality, integrity issue of data management. Look, and I mentioned JPL yesterday and their mountain of dark data and what the heck they're going to do with it. And when you look at IoT, and even though we continue to talk about embedded sensors and this, that, and the other thing, for God's sakes, we've solved the technology, the hardware problem. That's not the issue. We can put sensors everywhere. But as Doug, you pointed out, it's making use of that data, a lot of data coming in, and more and more. And if you don't have the proper tools and the applications in place, then you're going to be flooded. So my question to you are the tools out there adequate right now, or did you have to develop your own, or have some sort of a hybrid?
For us, I think the tools are out there. Now, we take a lot of data. I have 6,000 trucks running, 8 to 10 to 11 hours on the road every day. There's a lot of data points coming in. Throwing in a data lake and figuring out what we'll do with it later is great. There are tools for us to generate business outcomes off that data. Like, who do we price increase? I can get data that says, in our business, I'd rather pick up a feather factory than an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet, right? And so I would rather, price increase that. So I can get this data off the truck, off the scales when they dump a dumpster, right? And I can take that and generate business outcomes. I mean, there are solid tools. I mean, we'll get back to, do you have the right people to help you? Do you understand the business? All that's, exceptional. But, I guess in my organization, they look to us to help because we understand the business. And I have a team of about 10 that really understands the business really, really well. Hey, how about this idea? How about that? We're throwing stuff. And I'll be honest, 90% of it doesn't work. It fails, etc. But we've come up with some great ideas that have really changed and created new revenue models for us. But we're very careful about going out and just buying tools, just buying new things. It has to have some practical application. We do use some great consultants that come in because we don't know everything. So I think, the tools are out there. Use them wisely. Use your investments wisely, and make sure they're generating the outcome that you want.
So is this outsourcers presenting solutions to this? I mean, if you don't have a lot of capital investment money out there, can you go to an outsourcer and have them do that for you, or is that a smart thing to do, or not a smart thing?
We've done both. In our case, both. Yep.
Anyone else want to comment on the balance between outsourcing versus insourcing?
So I'll go. I think we do quite a heavy amount of outsourcing, and I think we do it especially in areas where we don't have the talent. And I think we try to build a lot of these services outside. We have strong SLAs with our vendors to make sure that we can control the performance and the productivity of these solutions. And I think the balance also lies between how do you support these things, what sort of managed services solutions do you have. Our entire cybersecurity, we kind of outsourced it because we know that keeping up with that is going to be difficult, and that's not our core competency. And again, we know that we've got some strong partners who are taking care of us 24/7, and we try to leverage on that. And we have focused our resources more on the business problems, on at least understanding the people, process, and the technology stack of what can we do from an IT perspective. And it's paid us huge dividends.
Do we have any questions? Come on, the people went to the gym this morning. You must have a question. You all have that energy right there. All right, you're next.
So in this panel, we talked about all these technologies. So what these technologies does is that these technologies exposes the organization to new capabilities on a very short cycle. So what are some of the ways the organization could adopt to respond to these new capabilities? And I can talk a little bit about my organization. So we have a change management function. We have a learning function, but those are all glued to the project. Nobody is still thinking about it as something that is going to continuously evolve. or we need to make it evolve because of the way that the technology is influencing our current business. So any thoughts on that would be valuable.
So just a couple of things I'll add to that. One is the culture. You just touched upon that. I think it is also depending upon the company's culture to evolve IT at the ideating table. And at least in manufacturing, I've seen that IT has always been an afterthought. But over the last 6 to 7 years, that is changing rapidly. I think we are now sitting at the ideating table, and we're able to share our ideas. So that part is helping us with that. And the other part is technology. I strongly believe that technology should, a business should be oblivious in terms of what technology we use. I think the important thing over there is the business outcome. If they say that I have a problem and IT fixes that problem and we've got a solution in place, the underlying technology should be oblivious to them. They should not, oblivious in the sense that nobody needs to know, are you using a form of AI with machine learning that will help us provide this, or are you using RPA with machine learning? That is immaterial, right? The point is, if that business problem is solved, I think we're moving forward. The next thought should be, now how can I leverage more after that? How can I use that to kind of drive more productivity or more growth or mitigate a risk or something like that? That should be the thought process. And I think if business is on that level, and if IT can also be at that level, the enablement or the underlying technology is almost invisible to them in terms of how that happens. So that would be the way forward, I would think. And it's difficult. It's easier said than done. I completely agree with you on that. But that's where the power of IT lies, in terms of making sure that you have a business problem, and here we're going to do it, and we'll solve it with a numerous ways of bringing in a technology-based solution into that stack.
A big part of that in your change management, you just kind of tied it into projects. And I think to really be able to embrace all the change that is coming at our organizations from every direction, we really need to focus on the culture and creating a change leader mindset throughout the organization, and not just change management from a project or new application. It's got to be embedded into our everyday thinking.
Just to add into that, we created, so of all the things I've talked about, we created 5 product teams. And I took that 30% that I mentioned was the most difficult for me, and I put them on those product teams, right? And this is something that the CEO, the CFO, the CEO, the board, this strategy was all agreed upon. So I took the most difficult people that wanted to resist change and embedded them in those product teams. So it's IT and and the business working together to make these business outcomes possible. And that really broke down a lot of barriers and got them involved and had them, to your point, yeah, they don't really need to understand the technology, but it got them involved so they learned what the back end was and they supported it. Again, easier said than done, but I found that, at least in our organization, fairly successful.
And just to add to that, we also have this concept of embedded IT. So my IT supply chain team sits with supply chain. My IT finance team sits with finance. So none of my IT members, or I shouldn't say none, most of my IT members sit with the business. They are in their daily meetings, their staff meetings, their 6-month meetings and things like that. So we don't have IT sitting together as a group. We have IT sitting with the business, and that kind of helps the case, because when you go to these meetings, you won't be able to figure out who's IT and who's business. And that's also an important factor there.
I think we had a question from this gentleman here. You still have a question?
Sorry. Hi, Mark By with Cross First Bank. Ken, I just wanted to do a quick follow-up on something you said earlier, which was that the traditional ways of handling data just aren't working anymore and you need to do better. Could you expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah, I don't think we have good processes as a whole that worry about how do we focus on data hygiene to make sure we've got the quality and the integrity of data. How many of you go back and look at that data on a period event to find out what's old, or the last time someone cleaned out some group of contacts or companies you're doing business with to see if those are still the right people? Probably not very often, if at all. We have how do we push that data around and make it available for our community on any device, anywhere, securely. If we think about traditional ways, we've got some big monolithic database or databases inside our data center, and we've got to figure out how to get there. How are we being able to grab that, what we need, out on the mobile device when we're on the golf course, enabling us to make the right business decisions? So how do we move that the right way? We don't understand the value of our data. I bet if I asked everybody in this room, myself, we could not answer truly what the value of our data is. And as a result, we treat all data the same, as if it was all created equal. And it's not. So we spend a lot of money managing it and securing it the exact same way, whether it's the most critical piece of the family jewels, if you will, that's mission critical, to something that's just not that important to the organization. So we've got to understand the value of our data. I think there's an opportunity to focus on that so that we can then make the right investments in how do we treat those different segments of data appropriately. And there's a number of technology, and a big part to that, it all falls under this concept called data ops. We've heard Isaac mention DevOps yesterday. This is, to me, it's an add-on. It's the continuation of what we do for delivering applications. How do we start to move the data and manage the data appropriately for where we need to go? And I've used it a lot of times, how do we do it at the speed of business?
All right, we have only a couple of seconds left, but I want to do an experiment in speed observations. Innovation has been a growing buzzword out there. A lot of camps focusing on what's valuable, what's not valuable. Very quickly, what are your thoughts on advice for employing practical innovation in an enterprise? We'll start with Rohinee.
I would say learning to fail and embracing the fact that you will fail.
All right, Doug?
That's the key for me, but I'd also say partner with the business. Don't just fail in IT, fail with the business. Make sure that you're working with them on innovating, creating new products, be a disruptor.
Okay, Satya?
I think it's important to look at innovation from a venture capitalist's perspective. You're going to invest in 10 different projects, 8 of them are going to fail. And those couple of projects that work will actually reap dividends for you that will compensate for all of that. I think the point with corporate culture is that we look at an ROI in every single innovation project, and that's where the problem is. We got to shift the perspective and say, I'm going to start a entrepreneurial venture within my organization. We'll fund 10 projects. We'll see how it goes. If it fails, it fails. But that's the thing where it's okay to fail, and then you fail forward, and you basically learn from it, move on, and keep it going.
All right, Ken?
I think you understand what innovation means for your organization and industry, because what's innovative for one company may not be for another, and you've got to understand and focus on what's important for that for yourself from a process and a product perspective. So understand what that means to your company. Make sure everybody's on the same page.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to thank my panelists, the audience, and now at this time I'm turning the podium over to our spirit guide, Phil.
Oh boy. Thank you so much.